集团主办的瑞达利欧对话施一公探索变化世界的原则主题活动。我是本次活动的主持人戴媛媛，欢迎大家来到今晚的直播间。2020年新冠肺炎疫情席卷全球，一系列危机和不确定性也相应到来，社会秩序被打乱，急需重组。每一个人都需要在寒冬中实现自我的突破与进化，从而更积极地应对时代巨变。而桥水公司创始人瑞达利欧认为呢，在这些变化的背后存在着普遍和永恒的规律。他将多年的经验和观察拓展为周期模型，深入地分析了过往500年间的经济、社会、政治和个人案例，并将自己的分析结果凝结在他的新书《原则：应对变化中的世界秩序》中。这本书试图解答我们现在在哪里，我们的历史将引导我们走向何方，我们应如何应对等关键问题。那今天我们的直播间非常荣幸地邀请到了瑞达利欧先生以及西湖大学校长施一公教授，两位将围绕探索变化的世界的原则这一话题开展深入的讨论，共同探讨个人如何应对变化的世界，创新如何对人类和国家有怎样的意义，如何鼓励创新和探索，如何调整心态，实现人生价值等等与我们每一个人都息息相关的话题。那么在这里我先简要介绍一下两位嘉宾的情况。瑞达利欧先生是对冲基金公司桥水的创始人。2018年，达利欧先生基于自己的生活和工作撰写的《原则》一书，由中信出版集团出版，在中国大陆上市当年即畅销破100万册，登上了各大商业书的畅销榜。另一方面呢，施一公教授18岁考入了清华大学，28岁在美国约翰霍普金斯大学获得了博士的学位。2008年2月，施一公教授辞职回到中国，受聘成为清华大学的终身教授，并出任了清华大学生命科学与医学研究院的副院长。同样是在《原则》出版的那一年，也就是在2018年，施一公教授筹建了国内高等教育史上第一所由社会力量举办、国家重点支持的新型研究型大学——西湖大学，并担任校长。好的，我们现在已经看到两位嘉宾已经在线上等待了。达利欧先生呢与我们线上连线，他那边还是早上的时间。本次直播活动呢将全程以英文的对话进行，观众朋友们可以选择通过屏幕下方显示的实时语音翻译字幕来共同收看。Okay, first of all, we are more than happy to have Mr. Ray Dalio and Professor Shi Yigong here tonight, and we now can say that Ray is connected in. Good evening and good morning to you, Ray, in the stage, and would you like to say hi to our audience online?
Yes, and good evening.
Thank you, Ray. And we can see that Professor Shi is ready online too. Hello, Professor. Great to have you.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you both. What a night to have you join us. I believe that our audience just cannot wait to listen to your great speech and exchange of idea. And now we will give the stage to Mr. Ray Dalio. So Ray, could you tell us more about the concept of cycle in your new book, Principle for Dealing with the Changing World Order, and how we can use to deal with the future development?
Well, I'd be happy to do that. I'm so excited. Professor Shi and I have a remarkable amount in common, even though we come from different worlds. You know, the focus of Professor Shi is a lot on science and development and innovation in that regard. And my background is as a global macro investor. But we shared interesting developments in our lives that have made our lives intertwined. Professor Shi and myself each grew up from very humble beginnings in remote areas. And we were interested and curious, and circumstances brought us to each other's countries. And we've spent a lot of time in each other's countries. And we've evolved. And so we have a lot to talk about in common from these different backgrounds. And so I'm looking forward to that. I'm a global macro investor, which means macroeconomics. So my background as a global macro investor for 50 years or a little bit more than that has been to go globally, all through most countries in the world, and understand their economics, and then bet on the directions of those economies. So it's been a fascinating experience that has brought me into understanding the politics and all of the things that affect futures over those periods of time. And I learned through that process that many things that surprised me were things that never happened in my lifetime before, but happened many times in history. And so I learned that if I didn't understand what was happening before my lifetime, I would run into problems. In fact, by studying what happened in the Great Depression, I was able to anticipate the 2008 financial crisis and invest well during that. And so recently, over the last number of years, three big forces that hadn't happened in my lifetime to the degree that they are now happening developed. Those three forces were, first, the creation of a lot of debt and a lot of printing of money to pay for that debt. We saw that first in 2008, and now we're seeing it in much greater degrees. In the past, when central banks would want to be stimulative, they would put in lower interest rates. But every lower interest rate to stimulate the economy, to give people money and credit, to give them buying power, they would always do these things. So they lowered interest rates until interest rates hit zero, and then they printed a lot of money to create a lot of debt. And that debt created buying power, but of course, it created obligations, and it created a lot of financial assets, because one man's debts are another man's assets. And you're either going to get paid back in money that is hard, or they're going to print the money so that it gets paid back in devalued money. And in 2020, that happened to a greater degree than has ever happened in our lifetimes. One has to go back to the 1930 to 45 period in the world to see that. And so that was one of the ingredients that let me study the last 500 years of cycles. The second factor, related to the first factor, is large wealth gaps and large political gaps that took place, particularly in the United States and Europe. It's a cycle that when there's a capital market cycle, and what that means is that when there's a lot of capital markets, individuals have great opportunity. I lived, in a sense, the American dream, and in other countries, they lived in other dreams where people with ideas could come along and get financial resources to pursue those ideas and to be creative. And that raises living standards over a period of time. And the development of markets, capital markets, that allow people with capital who save to give it to others who put it to good use to be productive, has raised living standards over periods of time. But it distributes wealth unevenly, because those who make a lot of money make a lot of money, and those who don't, less. And the circumstances create unequal opportunities. For example, children of those who have a lot more money have better opportunities than those who don't. The children of those who don't have parents have a lot of money. And as a result, the cycle, the big cycle, is that greater and greater debts and greater wealth gaps emerge. And those become quite tense because when a cycle reaches a point where that is limited of how much debt can be taken on and how much and large wealth gaps, things can become more difficult. And the third great cycle, third great force throughout history is the rise of a great power to challenge the existing great power and the existing world order. It's natural. So in studying history, I saw this happen over and over again in that cycle. And so we see it as China has grown and improved and strengthened and become healthier in many ways. As I mentioned, I've come to China since 1984, and I've had the pleasure of participating in and seeing the development. Since I came in 1984, per capita income has increased by 26 times. The life expectancy has increased by 10 years. The poverty rate has gone from 88% to less than 1%. It's remarkable. Earlier, when Professor Xi and I were talking, we talked about how different it was for not many years ago, you know, when he was younger and I was there. And it's been remarkable accomplishments. And of course, China now is a country which has the strengths that's like the United States, comparable in many ways, and is also growing at a rate which implies that it will be larger. China's has a population that's more than 4 times the size of the United States population. So if per capita income is half the United States, then it will be twice as large. So I studied these cycles in history. I'd like to just show you a chart that shows the empires going back since 1500. And by drawing your attention to that, you can see this evolution over time. It's shown in this chart. The chart begins in 1950, and you could see the arcs of empires. These are 11 major empires, but I'd just like to quickly point out the major leading ones in terms of wealth and power. The red line all the way on the left is China. And so you can see that red line, if you follow it through, you could see it was the richest and most powerful country right around 1500, right after that. And then its relative stature declined. And then you could see around 1840 the decline in what was called the 100 Years of Humiliation. And then you could see the very strong rise since then to rise up to approximately where the United States is. This is an index of total power using 8 different measures of power. But you could see in the yellow line, you could see the Dutch, and you could see the rise and decline of that yellow line, the Dutch Empire. And then you could see in the black line, the rise and decline of the British Empire. And you could see in the blue line, the rise and early decline of the American Empire. And those things have followed over periods of time. And with that examination, I learned why. They rose and declined for pretty much the same reasons over time. And I'd like to just give you a very brief explanation of that cycle, because I think it's very important to see where we are in that cycle right now. So I'm going to turn that over and just show you that evolution of a typical cycle. Can you please play that?
The archetypical big cycle. Broadly speaking, we could look at these rises and declines as happening in 3 phases.
So that big cycle of going from one new order when there is a either a civil war leading to a dominant power, or in the world order, an international war leading to a change in systems. That beginning takes place. So in 1945, we entered the New World Order, with the United States being the dominant winner of the war and shaping that world order. In 1949, there was a new domestic order in China. And then the cycles begin, that building, and we follow that cycle. And so seeing that cycle and seeing where we are is important. And when those three things come together, when there's a rise of a great power challenging existing great power, naturally there's a competition, a conflict, and inside, when there are large wealth gaps and financial problems, there is a conflict. And what happens all depends on how the individuals behave. But the greatest force is the force. There were two other forces that came and became apparent. One was the acts of nature. It was very interesting to me to see that acts of nature in the form of pandemics, droughts, and floods had a bigger impact on the circumstances, life expectancy, and other influences than anything else. So, for example, this chart shows on the left, we see how many deaths occurred because of wars, and on the right, that's because of acts of nature over time. And so you could see that. So we are now in an environment where we see occasionally, whether it's a pandemic or with global warming and changing, you see changes in the environment that begin to have impact. But all of those combined are less important than the fifth influence, and that is, over time, the inventiveness of man. This chart goes back to 1500, and it shows a per capita income on the left, and it also shows life expectancy on the right. And what you can see is that that very strong upward movement because of man's inventiveness and adaptability has created this very big rise in living standards over that period of time, and that the wiggles that we're talking about, such as wars and such, in that context, appear very small in comparison. But they're very big up top. They could be a 10-year period of great difficulty. And so in seeing this, I step back and I think about where we are in the cycles, because that's very important to me, and I think to us as a society, to think about how we work. And the most important thing that Professor Shi and I agree on is the importance of working well together, because that working well together, to be able to be productive and innovative and not to let conflict stand in the way of disrupting all of that, is the most important thing. So we live in a world right now where there is more resources and more abilities to have good life and to be inventive. And the issue is really one of conflict. And if we could work well together, we have an opportunity to make things better than ever. So thank you for allowing me that time to convey my thoughts about where we are in the context of history.
Thank you so much, Ray. And now we will move the spotlight to Professor Shi. Professor Shi is a well-received educator, innovator. So, Professor, what would be your essential advice that you'd like to share with the audience?
Having listened to the lecture by Mr. Darlio, I've learned a lot. I concur with everything he said, and it's been fabulous to listen and to learn the lessons of humankind over the past maybe several thousand years, especially the past 1,000 or 2,000 years. So in my view today, I'm only going to share one little spot of what Mr. Dalio talked about, that is innovation at present time and our future. Life is a miracle. Through 5,000 years of innovation, we humankind have created the biggest miracle on Earth, an interconnected, interdependent, highly civilized global community. As Mr. Dalio pointed out, from printing and learning how to navigate safely in ancient times to the creation of automobiles and cell phones in this modern era, we have been thoroughly enjoying the benefits of innovation by our ancestors and by modern technologists. The pace of innovation has dramatically accelerated as our world is changing over faster than before. As a consequence, we face more challenges than ever. In this incredible world, each and every one of us has a unique personal journey. As Mr. Dalio just phrased it, we are experiencing the innovations of our times, while we each forge ahead and contribute our innovations to the world. At the age of 2, I followed my parents to an underdeveloped village in a small town in south-central Henan province. At age 18, I was so fortunate to be able to attend a top college in China, Tsinghua University. In 1990, I waved goodbye to my mother at the Shanghai Hongqiao Airport and flew to the US for graduate school. The 5 years of biophysics training at Johns Hopkins and 2 years of postdoctoral experience at MSKCC gave me core skills of innovation in research. Both places being multicultural and highly collaborative, I could see the value and learn the importance of the environment for innovation. From there, I joined the faculty at Princeton University. My wife, twin children, and myself enjoyed a happy family life in a picturesque college town where Albert Einstein once lived for 22 years. To the surprise of my colleagues, I resigned from a tenured professor position at Princeton and returned to China in 2008. In the bigger picture, my journey is quite representative of 4 million others in China. Following Deng Xiaoping's historic visit to the US in January 1979, China opened her door to the outside world for the first time in 3 decades. That year, several hundred students from mainland China ventured into the US to embark upon precious opportunities of education and research. Many more followed in the following years. By now, more than 6 million mainland Chinese students have had the opportunity to study in the West, creating perhaps the biggest wave of studying abroad program in the history of humankind. Being one drop of this wave, I joined the more than 4 million other students who have chosen to return to China upon completion of our studies. We are contributing to innovation in every corner of China. Take the biopharmaceutical industry for an example. In a quarter of a century between 1984 and 2008, China altogether only approved 5 innovative Class 1 drugs made by domestic companies. Owing in large part to research innovation of the returnees with government support, China has approved more than 70 such medicines between 2009 and 2020. Even better, China begins to develop and provide best-in-class medicines for the world. Innovation has indeed taken its root in China, a victory of education, exchange, and collaboration. More recently, I have had the very good fortune of collaborating with a group of diverse thinkers who share common values, to not just develop a new university here in China, but a new kind of tertiary educational institution. This magical, innovative place is Westlake University. The motivation for such an institution is that we, humankind, face increasingly tougher global issues. Climate change, environmental degradation, and healthcare challenges, especially infectious diseases, just to name a few. To tackle these challenges, we need to innovate our strategies. Building brand new institutions on a new set of rules and principles that focus on innovation is one of the potential strategies. Motivated by the pressing needs of education reforms and research innovations, a number of scientists and entrepreneurs, myself included, joined forces in 2015 to create a small, privately funded, world-class research institution in the beautiful city of Hangzhou. In fact, Westlake University itself is an innovation with new principles of fostering innovation as its central focus. It is supported by the public at large through the nonprofit Westlake Education Foundation. Formally approved in 2018, Westlake University is the first such university in the history of modern China. Presently, 180 exceptional scholars from around the world have joined the faculty, leading a research force of about 900 PhD students, 300 postdoctoral fellows, and 600 research staff. In close collaboration with industry and other sectors of our shared community, this formidable force is making headways into the frontiers of natural sciences, engineering, biology, and medicine. Built to address the pressing needs of humankind as part of its core character, Westlake University bridges the best of the East and West to benefit not just China, but also the entire world. In the course of innovation, we actually face a quagmire. On one hand, we must learn before we can innovate. Without certain knowledge, we have no idea about where and how to innovate. On the other hand, learning may set a boundary on our thoughts. Imagine us as passengers on a fast-moving car or a fast-moving train. For that regard, the faster the train, the sooner one can reach a defined destiny, but the less likely one can get off to explore the wild surroundings. In contrast, it is much easier to explore the unknown on foot, although a lone explorer runs a high risk of encountering dangers in the wild. Pursuing innovation often means being in the rare minority. By choosing to innovate, you have broken away from the mainstream and embarked on a lonely journey. Being a rare minority, you might be misunderstood, discouraged, ridiculed by your peers, or even suppressed by the public at large. Unfortunately, this happens in academic research all too often. Through great perseverance over what at times may seem to others like decades of fruitless, misguided efforts, some scientists eventually innovate, producing what appears to be overnight miracles. As an example, we have to look no further than the mRNA-based COVID vaccines. But really, how do we encourage innovations then? Innovation often grows out of a healthy culture, a culture that encourages differences and tolerates repeated failures in good faith. Innovation frequently requires critical thinking. After heated debate, the Human Genome Sequencing Project was launched more than 30 years ago and costed more than $2 billion to complete. But it triggers a revolution in biotechnology and biomedicine that is still unfolding. Collaboration promotes innovation. Individuals with different expertise from different research areas, institutions, and nations may join forces to make magic happen. Furthermore, diversity promotes innovation. Individuals of different backgrounds, regions, cultures, and ethnicities each bring unique strengths to facilitate innovation. The value of collaboration and diversity are best illustrated by detection of the gravitational wave in September 2015. We on Earth recorded the passage of gravitational waves that originated from collision of two black holes about 1.3 billion years ago. Westlake University treasures the culture of critical thinking, collaboration, and diversity. We strive to provide a uniquely safe haven for those researchers who compose the courageous minority. We live on Earth, a mammoth planet that we share with myriads of other living creatures. Also a mysterious planet that we are still grappling to understand. Our Earth is only a tiny blue dot in the Milky Way, almost negligible in the universe. The entire human civilization is merely momentary in the history of the universe. Despite our transient nature, we seek to understand the surroundings near and far. With brave curiosity and inspirational spirit, we are determined to explore the universe. We have set foot on the Mars. Actually, no. We have set foot on the moon, landed spacecrafts on the Mars, and detected black holes and stars billions of light years away. For the great challenges that humankind faces, our salvation is in our ability to innovate. Our future is in our hands. Treasure life, seek truth, innovate with a conscience.
It's a wonderful speech. Thank you so much, Professor Shi. We know from the previous introduction that Ray and Shi are from very different backgrounds, but are at the same time the top of their respective fields. I think I can say that it is a very rare opportunity to have these two giant minds to exchange their profound understanding on the same topics from different cut-in perspectives. So, for example, in his newly released book, Ray mentioned that innovation is one of the major indicators of national strength and the most powerful factor in pushing forward social development. And at the same time, Professor Shi emphasized that the unremitting exploration of science unknowns is one of the key forces that driving human progresses. So my question to Ray first is that, why do you think innovation is so important? And what would be its impact on society, nation, and individuals respectively?
Well, first of all, I want to say that Professor Shi and I have the most important things in common, even though we're living in these different worlds. The things that excite him are the things that excite me. And I just want to emphasize those things, which is innovation to make things happen with people from different perspectives, all that bring that differences together to create an environment and share interests. And so I know that Professor Shi and I would enjoy each other on a regular basis, and it is that commonality that also in Westlake University, as he creates that environment, and I try to create my environment, that brings us together, and that it is such minds that produce innovation. Now, why is that important? Well, it's the betterment of mankind, and it is the thrill of the newness. When I came to China in 1984, I saw the difference in living standards. But to give you an idea, I would bring $10 calculators and give them to very high-ranking officials, and they thought they were miracle devices. And then there were hutongs, and there was no innovation. There was no, the work environment was different. You were assigned your jobs, and it was narrow. And so what you've seen, experienced, all of you, is the rise in living standards and the rise in the intellectual stimulation that comes from being able to be a participant in those kinds of environments. So why is it important? Because it raises your living standards, but it also gives you an intellectual stimulation that makes for a richer life.
Thank you. And what would be your understanding, Professor Shi?
I share the view expressed by Mr. Darlio in every sense. Innovation is really the basic element of our society to move forward. If you think about it, everything we enjoy today comes from innovation. It may come from a few thousand years ago, may come a few hundred years ago, or maybe around us, yesterday, today. So we rely on innovation to make our society move faster, be more harmonious, and make our daily life, better. And from our unique perspectives, meaning Mr. Darlio and myself, we both have a similar, if you will, similar background in the sense we each come from remote areas in our respective nations. So as Mr. Darlio phrased it early on, and even though we did not have a chance to meet each other prior to this moment, we share a lot in common. And what struck me, another commonality between the two of us is our shared enthusiasm in continued development in China, I think. And despite some of the challenges ahead for China, I think China, in a bigger cycle, as Mr. Darlio phrased it, is, I think, on the rise. Presumably have not reached the top yet. So in this grand cycle, I think China will perform pretty well. And for China to move forward, which I think is for betterment of the world and humankind, we need innovation. So I think I've been babbling too much, but in one sentence, everything we do in our society, we must have innovation because that's our human nature. We have to innovate to make ourselves better. Otherwise, we dwell on the past.
And we talked about the impact of innovation to individuals. And at the same time, I think I can say that both of you are innovator role models in multiple fields. So I'd like to start from Professor Shi, what drives you to stay curious and keep exploring? And how do you deal with the inevitable setbacks and failures during your exploration?
The second part of the question is so easy for me to answer now, because I'm used to meeting failures on a daily basis. Usually experiments don't work in the lab. It works. If it works, usually, it's a success. If success is piled up on a daily basis, I don't have time to write papers, manuscripts for publication. So, meeting failure, having failed experiments is a regular part of my life. That is very easily understood for me and is very convenient for me to deal with. It is the first part, actually, that probably would take me a couple of minutes to answer. I think scientists go into research from different angles. For me, it is purely fascination about the nature, about the universe. In my, speech of 10 minutes, I described the universe. And Mr. Darlio and Anna, you may wonder why, I would, relate to the universe. Because as a person, as an individual, as a human being on Earth, from day one of understanding the surrounding to a basic level, I was fascinated by our position in the universe, looking, up to the sky, to the stars, and to, the planets. I just can't imagine how we got here, how we arrived here. So that burning desire to learn and to seek answers to the unknown have essentially kept me going for the past 30, 40 years. So even though I'm a biologist, I'm an amateur, if you will, astronomist, or if you will, I'm a amateur expert in astronomy. So I really, I'm diving into the unknowns. As you could also tell in my, little speech just now, I mentioned life is short, life is transient. For each and every one of us, we will have such a momentary, period, life on Earth. And the entire human civilization may be momentary in the history of the universe. And what for, if you ask, then, how we should handle our lives on Earth. For me, to get to the unknowns, to see how powerful we, humankind, can be, to see how much further we can explore into the unknown. I'm sure there are tons of unknowns. What we have known to date is no more than the tip of an iceberg, in the universe. So, I'm only regretting that I'm getting to be middle-aged, and my memory is no longer as good as 20, 30 years ago. Anyway, so let me not go too far. So I recognize scientists come to research from very different angles. Some want to cure diseases because their relatives, loved ones, had diseases, and others, out of interest for one peculiar area. For me, it is the sheer love of nature, sheer inquisitiveness towards the nature, towards the enormous unknown, and anyway, so imagination. So, thank you.
And Ray, what about yours? Do you agree or even share the same experience or feelings?
It's that's what I'm saying. It's identical. It's a hunger. It's a passion to understand how the world works. My book is on how the world works. So it's a passion, and then that learning, that hunger for learning, converted into action. To take that knowledge of how the world works and to experiment with realities, to convert that into action that produces results. There is an innovator's psychology, okay? It's an adventurer's psychology. And it was said earlier by Professor Shi that some people think that they will be criticized or they won't be appreciated or such things. This does not bother an innovator, okay? They don't need the approval. They don't need that. They are instead almost on a single focus journey to make those discoveries. And yes, to find that the mistakes are part of the learning process. So there's a hunger to do that and a satisfaction of a journey that allows one to personally evolve and to contribute to evolution. I think that's the purpose of each of us. We, as Professor Shi says, we live very short lives, and over a long period of time, it is passing our genes physically from one generation to another to evolve, to pass our knowledge to evolve. And so the purpose of man, I believe the natural purpose, and the purpose of everything in the universe is to evolve. And evolve means innovate. And so there is a natural joy that comes from personally evolving and contributing to evolution. And one feels that That's the excitement that gets Professor Xi up in the morning and gets me up in the morning.
In your book, Ray, you mentioned that by improving the level of education, we can help to promote the technology innovation. So top down from the nation, the society, to family and individual, what do you think we can do to cultivate high-quality talent from your background and perspective?
Well, in studying these cycles over the last 500 years, and then also I started with the Tang dynasties, so around the year 600, and to find the rise and declines of dynasties as well as empires, you see the same patterns. The beginning is education. In other words, the understanding of sciences and arts and so on. But education is broader than that. It's an education in also how people are with each other, the development of a civil behavior with each other. That's a very important part of education. And then there are two different types of education. There's the education of acquiring knowledge, which is skill, but there is also the education in original thinking. And so you see, a well-educated person can be a type of person that has a lot of facts and abilities to calculate in their mind, or another type of education is the ability to use their minds in original ways. And the difference between those is very important in terms of being able to create innovation, right? Because learning what was acquired in the past is not going to get you an innovation in the future, even though it's a foundation for that. And the one thing that was common of all the dynasties, you could look at it from the Tang, the Sung dynasties, and so on, is that the drawing on the greatest population, so that you do not know who is going to be in that society, the ones that will be the innovators. And so for all societies, it was to make it open to the greatest number of people and to create a meritocracy so that those people could be identified and rise and be supportive. And I think Professor Xi's background, my background, but also throughout history, you don't know where those people come from. So it's a type of education that includes innovation and curiosity, not just acquiring knowledge. It requires one to be different, that innovation, that adventure spirit, and it requires drawing from the largest percentage of population to see where that talent will come from.
Professor Shi, if we talk about the same topic but put it into the context in China, what would be your advice?
So again, I agree with everything Ms. Darlio stated. It's really a pleasure. I think when Ms. Darlio made the statement, I was nodding because I truly appreciated what he said. So a lot of common thoughts shared between us. I'd like to add a little bit in particular with respect to China's own circumstances. To me, education, of course, it's a necessity for everyone in our society. But because individuals are different, we should have education of different formats for different people, different individuals. In other words, education should be diverse. We should have a range of different educational formats. What I'm talking about? I'm talking about education reform. I think this is particularly important for a very large nation such as China. For China to move forward, for China to be able to innovate, and in science and technology, to be able to, cultivate talented students, next generation, China must relentlessly continue education reform. I think that's the only way to go. Think about this. In a nation of 1.4 billion people, if you only have several rigid forms of education, one or two several rigid forms of examination, and that will place severe limits on the type of students you might be able to train, educate, and give chances to. So for me, to me and to people of my generation, to scientists of my likes, we really think a large nation such as China should be always open to educational reform. And this is part of the reason why a group of us came together to build a brand new university. The question is the following. I have been, by the way, so Ms. Darlio, I have to explain a little bit more. So I had been approached over and over again by my friends, colleagues, and even relatives. And they asked me, Egon, why bother building a new university given that China already has over 2,000? I always, told them we are different. We are the only privately funded research university in the history of modern China, perhaps in the entire history of China in that regard, if we carefully define what is research-oriented university. Anyway, let me not go too far away from my own educational background of staying in China until the age of 23 and staying in the US for 18 years and then coming back to China. I think diversity matters. And to achieve diversity, we should give a greater degree of freedom to educational institutions to have them experiment different things. That works in great favor of the students, of the younger generations. Anyway, I should stop here.
From your personal experience and the conversation we just had, both of you are great mentors, great educators. I remember that in one of your interviews, Professor Shi, you mentioned that we need to educate and strengthen the sense of social responsibility of our student. My question would be, how do you understand social responsibility of individuals?
Yes. In many universities in China, we are training students with great skills. We have in-depth training in math, physics, chemistry, biology, literature, everything. And students are well versed with contemporary knowledge. And they are skilled to go on to pursue other professions in our society. But what is not quite adequate, as I see it, is the level of social responsibility. And what I mean is, when we go out in the world to fight for our own well-being, to fight, to have our own personal, uplifting stories in the making, our goal is in line with the overall betterment, should be in line with the overall betterment of our society. What I mean is, whatever we do in our society should not be contrary to the fundamental benefits or the fundamental interests of the society. For Westlake University, I think what I want to say is the following. For Westlake University, it is funded by the public at large. It is funded by private entrepreneurs, by private enterprises, by public enterprises, by the government, by all sectors of the society. By virtue of building a university through this fashion, I think our students should be thankful, should be grateful to the society, to all sectors of society. They should bear in their mind why they are enjoying so many benefits at Westlake University, why they are having a great deal of freedom doing research and being, treated very well in the cafeteria and in the classroom and in the laboratory with state-of-the-art, equipments, instruments, etc. So by thinking of, how they've been treated, they should have a greater degree of social responsibility, meaning to pay back to the society, to pay back to the ones who really love them, care about them, and, give support to Westlake University.
And Ray, I remember years ago to have read one of your impressive article, which was explained why you write principles. You said that the current stage of your life, you are devoting more energy and attention to philanthropy undertaking. And the most important thing is to pass on the principles that you have learned to help more people. So from your experience, how individuals can better realize the values to their own life and to the society?
I think that there's a natural evolution that I've experienced. And like Professor Shi, didn't have much, and then you learn and you work and you innovate. And I think there are 3 stages in one's life. The first phase is that you're dependent on others and you're learning. In the second phase, you go out and you work, and others become dependent on you, and you're trying to be successful. And then as you pass through that phase, you come to a phase in your life, which is the phase I'm in which I no longer I want, the most important thing I want to do is pass along to the next generation what I have that is valuable. And then I go beyond that. And so that's the phase. And I think that if one thinks about what does one want, what does one need, and one feels connected with the society, it is very natural to take what one has, the resources one has, and to make those available to those people who are in that other phase to help to enable them. And so it's that process that becomes very natural. For example, philanthropy. By the way, I learned about philanthropy through my son, who, when he was 11, went to an all-Chinese school in China, and so on, and time passed, and he realized that he spent a lot of time there, and he realized that there were special needs orphans who would not be receiving surgeries and so on, and he got involved. And one can realize that accumulating more for oneself is not, it's almost decadent. One feels a desire to pass that all along and be, helpful to the society to accomplish other things, such as, I imagine, those philanthropists who are helping to support Westlake University that Professor Shi's excited about. So I think that there's a natural evolution to being able to first take care of oneself, and then to go beyond that, where one doesn't need great amounts more for oneself, and one has a desire to help the society as a whole and to raise that up in terms of living standards. So I think that that happens in various ways. It happens to some extent by passing along money in philanthropic ways, but it helps also in passing along knowledge. And so in my particular case, it was passing along that kind of knowledge, what I've learned, and most importantly, principles.
It is very impressive to see that both of you and many of CITIC scholars and authors are on the same page to agree that effective collaboration is the key to tackling the grand challenges. What would be your understanding of effective collaboration and how we can do that? Perhaps I can ask firstly Professor Shi to answer this question.
I'd like to start actually by complimenting Mr. Dalio for what he just said. I thought, Mr. Dalio, I thought you are an economist and financial expert. I think you're also a philosopher. You beautifully and elegantly summarized the lessons of one person's growth So, in 3 phases. I think that's very elegant. I really liked it. And anyway, so coming back to Anna's question, and how do we have effective collaboration? I usually just, use examples to explain my opinion in this regard, because, I'm everything I think about is Westlake University, so I cannot move my thoughts away from Westlake University. Westlake University is a collaboration between, I would say, entrepreneurs and scientists. And from day one, when scientists coming together wanted to build a new university, we keenly realized, if we were to do this alone, we would not stand a chance to succeed. So we sought help from the very beginning by teaming up with a group of very passionate and motivated entrepreneurs. They are investors. They are, they are business owners. So basically, they joined forces with us from day one. And together, I think we are making magic happen. And Westlake University at this time has a headcount of over 2,000. So we are moving fast on our track of innovation. I think, I can have other examples, but I think I should stop here to have Mr. Dalio to comment. And maybe we can discuss a little bit, right?
And Ray, what would be your understanding?
I think the most exciting and most productive collaboration is the knowing about differences, the working through of differences, different perspectives. So as Professor Xi and I have spent time in each other's countries and so on, to see those differences, it's an approach to life in which disagreements raise curiosity. There are 2 different perspectives that people see. I think too often people want to be right. They have in their mind, they're making an argument, they've reached a conclusion, and they find disagreement something to get angry about. But not an innovator, not the type of people who want to seek truth. And so there's a psychology of curiosity at the differences and the ability to bring different perspectives to then do that back and forth way to make discoveries. I think that's essential. So that's why when Professor Xi has enjoyed time in the United States in both, and I've enjoyed time in China in both, and we bring together that kind of a community, it is most productive and it is most exciting.
I agree completely. So yes, so for effective collaboration, to have an effective collaboration, you want to have complementary expertise from the collaborators. So if collaborators all think alike, what do they have to collaborate on? If they all have the same level of expertise, the same background, the same everything, I think then it's more additive rather than synergistic, rather than collaborative. So you ideally, whether on science or on business or something else, you want to have people with complementary expertises, experiences, background, to come together, to discuss, to brainstorm, and to critically think about their scenarios, and eventually come to a sensible consensus. Anyway, so I agree. Yes.
Okay. So during our live event, there are many audience that are with us to share their opinions and asking their questions. Due to the limited of time, we can only pick up one from online to ask our guests. The question is about keep learning, and is from one of our broadcasting platforms. And the question says, Both Professor Shi and Ray are such successful role models to him or her, and you must be powerful learners to keep pushing forward. So for individuals, how can one learn to cope with changing world as we seem to have been facing a time of extreme uncertainty? Ray, would you please to answer the question first?
It's all a matter of attitude. If you view life as an adventure that you're on and the journey, and you accept the fact that it will have ups and downs, and that all those ups and downs are just a reflection of how reality works. And if you're curious about how reality works and how to interact with it to try to have the best life possible, then life is an adventure. And if you have that adventure, that sense of adventure, and you have that sense of curiosity, then all through those ups and downs, you will approach them better and you will find life to be much more rewarding than if you don't have that attitude.
Thank you. And what be your answers, Professor Shi?
Let me add maybe my 2 cents. We have a changing world. A world is developing even faster and faster, by year. And knowledge is accumulating at a very, fast rate. And every day for a scientist to look into journals, all she or he finds is there's incredible amount of knowledge, publications that cannot be, read over the course of time, suitable for research advances. That may create some level of anxiety. Actually, we should not. So I've always been telling myself to stay calm, to be good at what I'm doing. I always believe as long as I try hard enough on my own profession, in my own research area, and spending time to read the immediate relevant materials, and not to be panicking over fast changing environment, fast accumulating knowledge, and that should work out pretty well. So I hate to say this. Some of my students are hastily, going back and forth to look for new skills to be learned. And they are watching carefully new instruments, new equipments, in other labs. They become worried. They become worrisome, and they would want to learn new skills and how to operate a new machine, how to, get access to a new skill, etc. I almost always stop them. I tell them, you don't have to. Just train yourself well for the things that you are doing and do it really well. And when you see, but be vigilant of your surroundings and be aware of the changes around you. You don't have to spend that much time learning other things or even new things. Only learn those things when you see an immediate change in the making. When you see the thing that you are working on, that you are dealing with, require a new thinking, new method, new equipment, etc. So basically, I think we should maintain our composure. As long as we try hard on what we are good at, and then maintain our vigilance, I think things will be fine. Anyway, so I don't worry about too much the steep learning curve down the road for new things. I think we will be okay.
Thank you both so much for tonight. Great to have you for such a brilliant event. And I do believe that our audience will have so much to savor after this event. Thank you, and look forward to have the opportunity to talk to you next time. Goodbye. 好的。
We will make it because we are young.